For those of you who are coming in, I want to introduce you to Dave Smith. Dave Smith is a Bible professor at Indiana Wesleyan University. He is also the founder and leader of True North Ministry. Is that what you call it, True North Ministry?
True North, yeah, absolutely.
And that's how I met him. A couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, I was at a conference in Georgia where he was teaching, and he was giving a Bible study over a few days' time. And his approach to it just, man, I just fell in love. And his emphasis on the work of Bible study being the work that the people do, not that the pastor does on behalf of the people. Like that, I think, is the general idea.
Yeah, that's right.
And it just, you hear that maybe in seminary once or twice in a class, and you think, oh, that's a good idea. But that weekend, it really hit me hard. And so Dave came to our church in our little kind of small town of Corryville, spent a weekend teaching our leaders, teaching people on a Saturday all day, and then coming in and giving a message. And ever since then, he has been a periodic encouragement to me. I've gotten random texts on just encouragement of what he's seen and what the church is doing, letting me know what he's been doing. I got, I didn't bring it down with me. I got an advanced copy of a book that is fantastic. I'm about halfway through. It's solid. So that's Dave Smith, everybody. And so now that you've been introduced, so our topic today, forgiveness. And I'm going to start with this question because I make Eddie answer the question first usually. Can you think of a time when you experienced either forgiveness and no Jesus juking allowed? We don't say experience the forgiveness of Jesus and then we're good. But I mean, forgiveness from someone for something you've done, or you were harboring unforgiveness for something that someone else did to you. And you don't have to give details, but tell me about an experience of either one.
Wow, nothing like pulling a pin on a hand grenade and dropping it. Yeah,
it is a deep one. I know.
Well, I would say that is a part of shared life experience with all of us. Yep. There are people that have deeply disappointed me in the way they've treated me. And I could easily harbor resentment. But that's kind of like drinking poison and thinking the other person's going to get sick from it.
Augustine. I think that's Augustine.
Yeah. It makes us sick.
Yeah.
And so this is, when I say life experience, we all share this, but I have to drop Jesus into this because I didn't meet him till I was 25. And so for the first 25 years of my life, I thought when somebody hurts you like that, you just cut them off from your life and go find somebody better. I thought that was the way I handled problems. And then when I encountered Jesus, he kind of shows another model that says that you don't have enough friends to get rid of any. You actually have to reconcile with them. And the model is the way I drew you to myself and forgave you. That's a hard learning experience because by and large, most of us say something like 3 strikes and you're out. Yeah, I'll forgive somebody once or twice.
Right.
But then Jesus goes to this astronomical number of saying 70 times 7 times. That's how many times you forgive, which you really can't count, which means for the rest of your life, you will not be abandoning people like they are disposable. You've got to find a way through Christ to reconcile to them. So that was, for me, that was kind of that mind exploding, okay, this is a new way to do life. And I actually found that as I was forgiving people, I found that other people were forgiving me. It was not always one-on-one, like you've hurt me, I forgive you, we're fine. It is this much larger community where I forgive you and I find out somebody else is forgiving me. So sometimes grace and forgiveness comes from a completely different direction than I anticipated. And if I can use a word, that's when you taste and know that the Lord is good. He gives you something and it's unexpected, it's surprised, and it's a whole new model for, I'm not going to say for doing ministry, it's just a whole new way of doing community.
Yeah. I was taken back when you were describing that. I was taken back to my first memory of encountering forgiveness as being taught in a biblical kind of setting. It'd be at church.
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but I had in my head as someone, I don't think I had been baptized yet. I think I heard this early on, but I had encountered this sermon that made me think about what I thought forgiveness meant for Christians. So if you're not a Christian, if you're outside of that realm, then you have a certain understanding of what Christians mean by forgiveness.
Yeah.
And in my understanding of it, it was very superficial. It was very much like, okay, Jesus told them that they have to forgive, so they forgive, and that's why they do it. And so I never had to think about, or I never thought about the pain involved in forgiveness, in offering forgiveness, and the wrestling and the blocks and what real forgiveness is versus just, it's fine, or burying it, in the backyard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about maybe then the different kinds of forgiveness, if there are different kinds. So I've been reading I've had occasion to read someone. This is Everett Worthington. I want to get his introduction right. Everett Worthington is a professor emeritus in psychology at Virginia Commonwealth University. And what caught me was the bottom of his bio. Now, I'm just going to read it exactly as it is written. After the murder of his mother in 1996, Everett began thinking about how the practice of forgiveness relates to justice, faith, and virtue, which is a main theme of his recent work. While he forgave the murderer, as did his brother and his sister, the emotional fallout was devastating, and in 2005, his brother committed suicide. In addition to studying forgiveness of others, Everett drew on his own feelings of guilt and self-condemnation and added the study of self-forgiveness to his interests. That's not just a man who has studied as a psychologist in academic work, but one who has had to do that kind of work in the hardest way. But he does identify a couple of different kinds of forgiveness. He identifies decisional forgiveness. I decide to forgive. And then he has emotional forgiveness. And that is, I feel like I have forgiven. And then he says reconciliation is separate from both. Forgiveness can include both the reduction in vengeful and angry thoughts or feelings or motives that may be accompanied by an increase in some form of positive thoughts, feelings, and motives toward the offending person. Most researchers agree that forgiveness is not forgetting, it's not condoning or excusing the wrongdoing, nor is it simply the opposite or absence of bitterness and vengefulness. So he starts with that definition, which is not really a definition. It's like, here's what it's not.
Yeah.
All right. So what is forgiveness? What do you think forgiveness is?
Am I allowed to use the scriptures in this?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect time. Perfect time.
Forgiveness is this huge thing that is talked about in the Old Testament. So I'll start there. In the Old Testament, that God will forgive the sins of Israel. Now, often we kind of think, okay, that means God forgave each one of the individual Israelites. That's not what the text is talking about. So on one special day of the year called Yom Kippur, when the high priest goes into the temple and goes into the Holy of Holies once a year, he pours sacrificial blood on the top of the Ark of the Covenant for the sins, forgiving the sins of all of the people. That's that corporate sense that takes place. That is a big deal, because when you're going through the Levitical laws, especially, you know how when you begin reading the Bible, in January, I'm going to read the Bible in a year. You do pretty well till you get to Leviticus, and you go, I'm skipping to the Gospel of John.
Yeah.
But those first 7 chapters are talking about the forgiveness of unintentional sin. It's the sin that we do against somebody else, and we don't mean it.
Okay.
It has an unintended outcome that is hard or hurts somebody, but I didn't intend it that way. Those are the sins that are forgiven by the Levitical law. It is that one day a year when the high priest goes into the temple and pours the blood on the altar that the sins of everyone is forgiven. So if you could imagine only being able to receive forgiveness once a year for something done intentionally. That's God's way of saying this is serious stuff. When you hurt somebody, it doesn't just affect that individual, it ends up affecting the community. And now I know we know that, but we pretty much in North America are individuals. We kind of think of ourselves in working in silos, and hey, if I sin, even if I sin and no one knows about it, it doesn't hurt them. Yes, it does, because you don't have a reciprocally forgiving heart. Your heart has become hard. And so what happens when we do that is that we then come into the community, could be Quarryville, or it could be the local church there, and we do not offer grace-filled hearts. We only offer hard hearts.
Because they've been hardened. Yeah.
That's right. So we need to take seriously not just receiving forgiveness, but also giving it the way God does. And we need to realize the grievous nature of it. It is only reconciled in the Old Testament once a year.
That is, I've always thought of the Day of Atonement as being the day where you cover everything that you didn't cover in the regular temple sacrifices that you did. So it's kind of like a catch-all day. We got, if you weren't good, then come on that day and you get everything covered.
As a matter of fact, when you read through Leviticus, again, we skip past it because it doesn't seem to directly relate to us. I would hazard that it really does.
Yeah, but it feels like.
So there's sacrifices for unintentional sin, one after another. But then you'll actually hear Moses goes, but the sin of the high hand, and the sin of the high hand is where you intentionally hurt somebody. There is not a sacrifice for that.
Wow.
So it's kind of like, what do I do with it? You carry that guilt and shame until you come to Yom Kippur. What do? We, in pretty much in North American Christianity, we call it sin management, where I've done something wrong. I say, forgive me, God. He will forgive me. We're really not taking serious the grievous nature of sin or unforgiveness or the hurt that comes upon somebody.
Yeah.
It literally unshapes the community. And so when Jesus comes and begins to pronounce forgiveness, and apparently the Pharisees are upset with him because you're forgiving sin, and you're taking light of this. I'm not taking light. We as a church, we're only a week and a half away from Easter. Don't tell me he's taking light of this.
Right. It speaks.
He's taking it
to do it
seriously.
Yeah.
And now here's a interesting word that only a couple of times in the New Testament, in Romans and in the book of 1 John, Jesus is actually called, this is a fancy term, he's called the hilasterion. Sorry to sound like a Greek geek, but the word hilasterion is not a thing. It says in 1 John, if we sin, we actually have a atoning sacrifice. It's the word a hilasterion, and his name is Jesus. The hilasterion is not something Jesus does. It's what he is. It's actually the name of the top of the Ark of the Covenant. It's the mercy seat. Forgiveness comes as now the new high priest, Jesus, is not just the priest offering the sacrifice, he's also the top of the Ark of the Covenant, where God actually dwells in the world.